goal. Could you tell me, will the department be committing to have at least a French language supervisor in place to oversee the provision of French programming in every school board which is doing immersion programming?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And the intent of the department is hopefully the school boards will, before too long, have a structure that would prevent that from happening. Now, the programs with which I am personally familiar in boards, there is a supervisor in place, and I would be interested in knowing the specifics of a board that doesn't have a French supervisor.
Halifax has 3 coordinators. Minister, the Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic.
Sorry, I guess the answer appeared, yes, Halifax at the moment. Okay, beginning with that, one of the things that is also of concern, as in referring to the need for both of the official languages and this attempt to get people functionally competent in both official languages, it's possible to refer to this as well as vocational training. And I would like to encourage the department to follow through with this, because when we are concerned with the ultimate job prospects of our graduates, we do need to look at that very important vocational skill. Something which I've been very curious about, the Nova Scotia Community College is a very strong system with a very distinguished history, but one thing that I have been wondering about is the fact that it would appear that in some of the boards, at least, the flow of students is perhaps constricted by the fact that we don't necessarily have vocational programming or shop programming available in very many of the schools which were in fact built with shops. I've been told that in the Halifax Regional School Board there may be as few as 2 functioning wood shops left. How are we going to strengthen the interest in entering the community college system without cultivating that interest at the school level?
Thank you. There's about 30 seconds left in the NDP time frame. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you for that question. And obviously, this is one of the gaps that the O2 program was intended to fill. And I guess the thing is behind your question is there going to be money to put shops back in every school? Very, very expensive. I had said earlier this morning I was disappointed when they were taken out with no substitute put it in. I'm not so sure that was really the best type of decision, but we will be working with partners both in the community at the community college for shop space where it is needed.
Thank you, Minister. I'll recognize the Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure we have many questions to go over again today. I hope you can hear me well, because my voice is a little off today because I've had a cold. Are you ready? Okay. I wanted to pick up a little bit from some of the themes we had the other day, and I know I've been listening carefully to the questions that are coming up from my colleagues as well in the opposition, and listening to their themes. Certainly we'll be going over some of the same ground and maybe uncovering some further answers. One of the things I wanted to begin with was the actual increase in spending in this budget. The minister has said on a number of occasions, he's like to quote the press release, I believe, that came out from the Nova Scotia School Boards Association, in which it would be the president of NSSBA, Ronald Marks, said that he was quite delighted. I haven't got the exact quote, but he was quite delighted with the extra money you'd provided this year. But what the press release also says is that this NSSBA had been asking the Department of Education to increase education funding by $30 million each year for 5 years. This increase would bring the per pupil funding in Nova Scotia up to the level of New Brunswick, which is the highest in Atlantic Canada. So in the press release, they say they're hopeful that the government will deliver on this need. I'd like to know your opinion, please, or whether there is a commitment with the School Boards Association and with the children and parents of Nova Scotia to continue that as an annual event for 5 years so that we can reach that same per pupil funding as New Brunswick. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, thank you, and I thank the Honourable Member for that question. I believe words used by the chair of the School Boards Association in the release was, it was tremendous news for public education, the increase in funding. And I think in the release he had gone on to say that he had, as an organization, the School Boards Association had requested a $30 million increase, and that we had met it this year, and he was quite happy with that. But quite frank, Mr. Chair, I hope that we would be able to continue that increase for the next 4 years. Certainly would be my goal. And of course, as we all know, it depends on the financial resources of the province and the other competing interests.
Thank you, Minister, for the question. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
I'd just like to have the minister confirm again, and there has been no commitment then to continue this spending. As you say, it's dependent on many factors, so there is no commitment.
Yes, thank you. The honourable Minister of Education.
I think a way to answer that question, Mr. Chair, is that 3 years ago we introduced Learning for Life, which had financial commitments in it, and we have met all of those commitments. I think next week, 2 weeks. 12th. On May the 12th, we'll be releasing a Learning for Life 2 Brighter Futures together. There will be financial commitments in that. And it is our intention to honor those commitments that will be in there, as we did in Learning for Life 1.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Minister, I have a few questions, if I could, through the chair to the minister, about Learning for Life, which is already, it's on your website, and we've had it for many years to look at. There were some promises made in that document. One of them was better information for parents from the government in the form of a standard report card, an annual minister's report to parents, and an interactive website, and also parent brochures. I don't think that we've seen some of those things happen. In terms of better information for parents, I certainly haven't experienced that, and I don't think there's any standardized report cards yet across the province. I wonder if you could talk to those issues that I just mentioned there. I mean, we're talking about detailed information on your child's learning. That was what was promised. And as an example of maybe something that fell short of what was promised in that document, Learning for Life, we talked about by 2005, or I think it said 2004, that there would be these standardized tests would be done and parents would be given the exact information or given some good feedback on that. Well, the tests were done October 2004, and the results were released in March 2005. And what I understand, the information given to parents was either they met the outcomes or they had not met the outcomes. And again, that's not very detailed information. And I know I've received report cards like that on my children, even in junior high school, which would just tick off that they met the requirements, which is not very instructive to a parent who's trying to, assess where their child's at and help them as much as possible to improve. So if you could just relate that to the Learning for Life document for me, please.
Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and indeed the Learning Life document did make some commitments, and we did follow up on them. First of all, let's talk about the report to parents. And is that going out yet?
Nope, ready to go though.
This year's report to parents, I know that I've signed off on it, and it will be released very shortly. And this is the fourth of those reports to parents, and I expect that the honourable member has seen those. And what it does is it talks about the performance of Nova Scotian students internally and comparatively. We are still developing this student information system, and the move to a standardized report card began in 2003, 2004, and I think this year the software which is going to make that possible will be installed across the district. The difficulty with that standardization, it was a problem with software as opposed to determining what information should be made available. And I think that we've got those glitches worked out, and you will have your answer. You will see that before the end of this fiscal year. And of course, the website for parents, was developed and expanded. You also, what was it, the report to parents information system, standardized.
Parent brochures are in this budget.
The parent brochures, $50,000 is allocated in this year's budget for those parent brochures. The other thing was you talked about the grade 6 literacy results and going to parents as either met objectives or didn't meet the objectives or whatever the other term was. The detailed information on each child is available from sitting down and meeting with the teacher. And although you know, the paper and pencil or the computer can provide very, very good information, having a relationship with your child's teacher, I think, is really a very key part of the information system.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Halifax-Clayton Park.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Minister, as well, for that answer. In terms of having a good relationship with your teacher, I can't agree more, but I think that there are many parents that have a lot of hurdles in terms of having that rapport with the teacher, and information coming home might be helpful. One of the hurdles that I've recognized recently has to do with our immigrant community, where they often feel, you know, somewhat, I guess, intimidated would be the right word, or, you know, unsure of themselves when it comes to going into the schools, perhaps because of their own language ability and so on, that they don't get into the schools and get a good rapport with the teachers. And even when you go to the student-teacher interviews, they're very short. I mean, I think it's been as small as 5 minutes between visits. And so you hardly get to say hello before it's time to leave. And that becomes more difficult as the kids get higher in school, because when they're in elementary school, you might have time to go in and volunteer and spend some time there, and that's not possible for all parents. Another issue, too, is the literacy of the parents and the level of education that they may have. And I know I have a sister-in-law who's a teacher and has taught in schools that have the +4 program, and here in Halifax that means areas designated as special needs. And sometimes the parents can't read the report cards either that come out, so they certainly need to speak to the teachers, but we need to find avenues so that they will come in and get that information. And in terms of your report card to the parents, I haven't seen it as yet, so I'm curious how it's supposed to be distributed. If it does go home in every school bag, or what happens to it. Doesn't mean that it hasn't been in my son's school bag, but I think it's a good question. I'm sure there's a lot of parents who feel the same way, that they don't see things coming home from school. But I do think you have to recognize that it's not as simple as parents having access to get into the schools and get to know the principal and teachers. Sometimes there are a lot of reasons why they can't. Sometimes they're working many jobs, too, in order just to make ends meet. So there are a lot of problems on that end. So just to touch on those, you can answer that in a minute. But I'd also like to know, in terms of those grade 6 results that we talked about, where the test was taken in October and the results available in March, how would you respond to the question about how a teacher or that school can respond in terms of helping the children that have done poorly? Because it's already late in the year by the time you get the results in March. You know, you've taken the test early on, but there isn't a chance for a timely intervention.
Thank you, Member, for the question. The Minister of Education.
The Honourable Member, and I'm trying to remember whether she had the opportunity to participate in the session out at on Kempt Road when we did the announcement of this year's test results, and I think probably she wasn't, because in that particular instance we had three practitioners, one of whom addressed very specifically as a parent the follow-up that her child had received from the school. And if you remember last year, because of this testing program and our commitment to allow money to follow students who needed remediation, we budgeted for that last year $1 million, and of course it's going to be more than that this year, because the money now has to follow a new group of students. So now it's $1.9 million, and the school was charged when a child did not meet standard, then there had to be an individual plan developed for that student. Now, I can also tell the honourable member, and she certainly knows this, is that there are cases where probably the test really didn't measure what the student knew accurately. The teacher's assessment of the students' literacy skills exceeded that which showed on the test, and so not every child got detailed or intensive intervention. This was the case of marrying the opinion of the teacher with the opinion of the external test in going forward. But also, all parents were brought into that consultation. Or, let me rephrase that, all parents had the opportunity to be brought into that consultation.
The member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Chair. That does help to some degree, and I'm sorry I wasn't at your launch. I will be at the next one when you bring the next results out, so I'm sure that I'll have something to say at that time again. I'd like to go to your pre-primary program for a little while, because I think that it's been touched on by a number of members, but there's an awful lot really to look at in this, in terms of how we've planned it and how it's going to roll out and who benefits, and whether or not it has a negative impact on daycares. And I think I'll start by framing it around the difference between early childhood education and the kind of education training that teachers get, that they are very different programs, and I think that the minister would recognize that, and I'm sure he's had representation from both groups. The moment you announced that it should be, that it would be a classroom in a school, it seemed that teachers immediately said it should be staffed by a teacher. And then, because it's pre-primary, the daycare specialists who are trained in early childhood education, and again, our university graduates, say there is special training needed to deal with pre-primary, and it may not be appropriate to put them into a public school. So, you know, I think that we've got a bit of a debate going there, and I haven't heard in your answers about where it might go and who will get it, how we've addressed that debate, and things like the class size and so on that's appropriate for an age 4 child might be different from children that are 5 and up as we get into the public school system. So perhaps you could just start with the debate between those two different professions, really.
Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Chair, and the honourable member is right. There not really a whole lot of debate, but certainly the fact that these sites are going to be in public schools and they are going to be under supervision, overall supervision of the school principal. Not unexpectedly, the position of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union was that, well, clearly these classrooms ought to be staffed by teachers. The position of the department, and actually the one which is going to be followed, is that these pre-primary programs will be staffed by early childhood educators. And we, like you, recognize the difference between early childhood education and public school education. And also, these programs are really going to be school readiness programs, although clearly there are activities which will take place, which are intended to strengthen a student's sort of academic readiness for going into the public system. A lot of it is going to sort of be the old kindergarten model, where there is a lot of social readiness skills and social skills, listening skills, and things like that. If you perhaps remember that one of the ways that Nova Scotia differed from every other jurisdiction in Canada a number of years ago was that we had the only academic, quote, academic first year of school in the country. Every other province and territory had sort of the old kindergarten model. We actually had an academic program designed for our 5-year-olds. We were the only ones, and This obviously was one of the things that influenced that debate about when a child should go to school. It was one thing to go to school in the kindergarten program. It was another thing to go to school and get into an academic program.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
A couple of further questions, if I could, on how we're going to roll out this pre-primary program. I've heard you say there's 20 sites and it's up to the individual school boards and so on, but I'd like to know whether the plan is to really target at-risk communities, like communities where the children need that extra, which would be similar to what we've done in Halifax Regional School Board with the +4 program, and that again is paid for by supplementary funding and has been very successful. Or are we looking at some kind of universal program, because this is a pilot, obviously? Are we aiming for a universal? And the other question around that is busing. In the rural areas, busing will be an issue for this grade level, or this extra class that you're going to be putting in, and I wonder how that's being addressed, because I understand from a number of school boards that they have real concerns if busing is not included. So perhaps you've already addressed that, but it's a question that's been raised with me.
Honourable Minister of Education.
Oh, thank you, Chair, and let me welcome you to the chair. We're going through them at a rapid rate this morning. Must be Friday. You've raised some very, very good points. First of all, the school board will pick those sites, and I fully expect that need will be a major criterion used. As I said in response to the member earlier, the opposition party earlier, the intent is not to have those programs in direct competition to successful programs that already exist. We're trying to pick areas where there is need and there is not really competition. And I know, for example, a member from Halifax Fairview the other day, he talked about sort of made a request for programs in his community, but that is something that the school board they're charged with making that decision. You mentioned busing, clearly an issue. It's an issue for a couple of reasons, and school boards, and this is one of the reasons the school board said to make haste slowly. One of the really the issue even of what type of bus transportation is appropriate is something that has to be taken into consideration if we're going down a year. But clearly we know that the transportation issue is something that has to be addressed. The school boards know that it has to be addressed, and it will be addressed, and the programs obviously can't operate until such time as they are.
The honourable member from Halifax Clayton West. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. That's all right. In terms of busing, I would like to just, I guess, share with you some of my views on that. But if busing is not included, particularly in these rural boards, the program really, I don't think is serving its purpose, because the children who would have to be brought by their parents to school are the ones that are probably already getting enrichment, are probably already going to daycare or play groups or nursery schools. And so I think that they'd have fun at it and enjoy it, but I don't think they'd be the group that we need to spend public money on. What we want to do is provide the public monies to go to the students who don't have the background and the vocabulary and the reading, just the interaction and so on with adults that they maybe should have had by the time they get to the age of 5. And that I know that any school board can pinpoint the schools and the areas where the need is greatest. I know that from having attended an event at the Dartmouth Boys and Girls Club, I guess it is, in North End, Dartmouth recently, they referred to that community as having an average educational level of grade 9. The parents in that community have an average education of grade 9, which really shocked me, that there would be a community with that demographic, I guess, or that criteria. And what I think is it's very clear that those children, and 25%, by the way, 25% of the children in Dartmouth live in that riding. And that's pretty significant. So obviously, providing primary and daycare and special preparation for school in that area is very important. And in fact, it was a nursery school program that we were there to see that is free to the public at $70,000 a year. They were in fact struggling for money. I don't know if they're going to be able to offer that next year or not, but I haven't heard an update in the last month. However, those kind of programs are serving a tremendous need that's outside of the school, but it's serving that same need, that preparation for school. So your point about not wanting to conflict with existing programs, it might be good to also, I don't know if it's possible to use those monies to bolster some programs like that might be at risk, because all of these programs like that are provided in a community tend to go from one grant or one grant application to the next, and the people who offer the program are always struggling to keep ahead of that. But literacy was the primary goal of that program, providing them with words and skills and reading and just preparation for vocabulary building and so on, which they would never get unless they had this extra enrichment. So I am concerned about that. As I say, the busing will be critical, because if we're relying on parents to bring the children to the schools, that might be fine in the city, but it won't be outside. The second thing is, are we talking about a full-day program or a part-day program? That also has a lot to do with accessibility for parents. And again, if you're changing to a full-day program, your staffing ratio should be changing if you're following the same guidelines you use for daycares right now. And I don't see why you would use a different criteria than you have currently set up for daycares. So could you relate to some of those questions, particularly now the staffing needed, full day or part day?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I'm going to have to really refer your direct questions about the current conditions in daycares to my colleague, the Minister of Community Services. But it is our intention to run those programs full day, staffed by early childhood educators. We are certainly aware of the busing issue, and the point that you raised that if parents had to bring their children to school, we may be drawing largely from population of children who are not those for whom the program was first intended. Anyway, we're they are pilots, and there will be adjustments made in terms of feedback, in terms of everything. I want to say, you talked about the community in Dartmouth where the average literacy level of the community is grade 9, and there are other communities in the province where that is the case, and that's why, or lower, absolutely, yes, absolutely. Through the Nova Scotia School for Adult Learning, we're helping about 5,000 Nova Scotians just about every year, and it's this adult learning program. We've got about $6.3 million invested in that, or committed to that this year. And if you have not had the opportunity or have not taken the opportunity to attend one of these adult high school graduation ceremonies, I encourage you to do it, just to really see firsthand how important this adult education that is offered with the support of the department and some through the federal government and offered right really is, and what a difference it can make in the lives of a number of people.
Member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. My last point on this early childhood program is that and this comes from a discussion with the Halifax Regional School Board, but they're concerned that it appears there's about $12,000 per class to modify the classrooms that are in the schools today for that younger child, and that might not be enough. Have you looked carefully at the budget to see whether there is sufficient money there to fund the educators and the modification of the schools, and perhaps the busing as well that might be required?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Madam Chair, We haven't received a lot of requests for modification. We would be prepared to give some help, but most schools, with the declining population, there are very few schools these days that would not have a space that was designed for young children. There may be some things that have to be done to shrink the size, but it's not something that we have heard a whole lot about. And of course, pilot project again, and we're prepared to receive feedback.
Member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. I'd like to move on to the subject of school libraries, if I could. I'm sure the minister took note of the fact that today I tabled a private member's bill which was entitled The Enhancement of School Libraries. Its subtitle was The Right to Read. And I think that the evidence is very clear from all of the research that's been done on literacy that there's a close link between having professionally staffed school libraries and having children and young people who are able to access information and improve not only their reading and writing skills, but also their ability to find answers and research things for themselves. And I'd like to know a little bit about our approach, I guess, to the libraries. I'm pretty well aware that there's been a lot of atrophy over the years, but I'd like to know what kind of commitments we do have on school libraries from a departmental point of view.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I want to tell the honourable member starting off that this government sees, I'm going to go beyond the school library. I'm going to go to the public library because I want to start there. It's that we've really made very good commitments to the public library, particularly the last couple of years, and I think the public libraries in this province provide an extremely valuable service, and it's really a center that belongs to the community, because I don't think of any other center, including a school library, by the way, where everybody can go and get some sort of service. So we have committed $1 million to public libraries this year, and more money last year when we had some additional money that we could invest, and that I guess shows the commitment of this government to the library system in Nova Scotia. Now let's get back into school libraries. At one time, most school libraries were staffed by a teacher librarian. Back in the good old days of 1993 and 94 and things like that, where there were severe cutbacks in education, one of the positions that didn't fare as well actually was the teacher librarian. And the decision was made where they were able to have a special person assigned to libraries. It was somebody who we would perhaps call a librarian technician. So the actual number of teacher librarians that exists in the Nova Scotia school system today is, I think you may be able to count them on one hand, and that is a teacher who's in a library. Now, having said that, I have just been in some schools where there are exceptional libraries because the classroom teachers, perhaps some of the new training that they're getting in teacher education, they used to get it at the Nova Scotia Teachers College, and some of the others have tried to pick up the slack. They use the libraries as regular instruction, so when we think the loss of the teacher librarian was catastrophic, I'm not saying it was a good thing, but we've been fortunate because many teachers have gone in and they've seen that the library remained a vital place in school, and particularly at the elementary schools. I can remember when I first moved back to Truro back in 1977, I guess we went back. we have an elementary school in the neighborhood which was kind of dated, and another person and myself, one whom the honourable member from Timberley Prospect probably knows, Mr. John Wheelock, who you would know him maybe from Mount A days. And he might have even played football for him, I don't know. Against him, did you? Okay. Anyway, he kind of led a work party, and we took a classroom in that school and turned it into a library, and it still functions, but that was parental volunteers. My carpenter skills being rather limited, I was not the lead hand, I can tell you that. But it did work. And what we see now, again, is a lot of parent volunteers in libraries, and I say I've been blessed in this role, going around to schools where they have active school community committees, and there are many first-rate libraries. Also, our commitment to that type of thing, if the honourable member perhaps remembers that we have put an additional million books into the schools over the last 3 or 4 years. The issue of getting literacy material and appreciation for literacy and the ability to do research, the honourable member will also know that a lot of the federal initiatives on information technology had to do with the providing money for computer hardware and software. And one of the big things in public schools is providing computers for students to access information. Very few classrooms that you go in now don't have computer technology, and I use that simply to jump off at something else. A battle we've been fighting here in Nova Scotia is about access to information. It's not only, I've been fighting it as the chair of the Copyright Consortium for the Council of Ministers of Education in Canada, but it also fighting it as the minister who is responsible for public school education in our province. And there were amendments proposed to the Copyright Act that would see a collective fee having to be paid for information on the internet, which is free and public accessible to anybody. But so we've been fighting that amendment. The honourable member would also know that we currently pay, how much do we pay to the collective? For which one? Collective. How much is our collective fee? $3.40? We pay every public school student in the province pays a fee to collectives now, or at least we pay to collectives on behalf of the public school, so that teachers will have the right to copy the odd piece of information from textbooks or from other things, or students might have the opportunity to do that too. And one of the other things we're battling is that if the proposed change went through, is that the change in that collective fee in this province would go from somewheres around $3, I think it's about $3.40, and don't hold me to that number, to more than 12. So you can see that why I've been spending, as my colleagues in other provinces and territories have been trying to ensure that our children have access, the same access to information. Our teachers and students have same access to the same information free of charge as any member in this legislature would have.
The honourable member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. I'll just wrap up on that point, but I think that you're right. I mean, we had more teacher librarians in the past, and the numbers were cut drastically. And I would challenge the minister that we need to rebuild our libraries, our school libraries. I'm glad you brought up public libraries. I mean, certainly in my area of Clayton Park riding, there's a fantastic library, the Kesh and Goodman Library. I am, and that again came as a bequest from the Kesh and Goodman family. I think that should be mentioned. The collection was moved from another public library, the former Thomas Riddall Library, but the building and the facility is provided by a a gift from a family. And so we're very blessed, and we love it, and it provides programs for new Canadians, literacy programs, children's reading and play programs, and it's been wonderful. And I do appreciate that, and I'm also a former board member of the Halifax Regional Library Board. So I appreciate that more money is going in there, and I know that they desperately need it. But in our school libraries, where children get a first-hand opportunity, even if their parents aren't taking them to the public library, they get a chance in their schools to be exposed to learning. And I think that we should be doing all we can to keep those libraries open and professionally staffed at all times. And although you make the point that teachers have taken up the slack and are using the school resources, I think it's really important to make the point that the teacher librarian in the school was a tremendous resource for teachers and helped them in guiding them and providing a lot of information as they develop themes and programs for children of all ages. So I think that although the past maybe, it's gone and bad things happen, we should be looking forward now in a time when you're heralding a budget that you claim is an education budget, that we look at rebuilding, and that's, I think, very important. On the actual budget, again, to look at our figures, I would like to know, within the $53 million that you've got there for public education, how much of that will actually be going for just keeping pace with contracts? And that was much of what went in last year. Almost 20 million increase last year was really just keeping pace. I think there was only about $1 million new dollars in last year's budget. So can I assume that it's $20 million now? Did you say speak faster?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
The easiest way for me to answer that question, Madam Chair, is to say that there is 21.4 of new initiatives from Learning to Life. That's new money. That's not money that is being used for something else. That's this year, yes. In addition, of course, is the money which is going to flow from health promotion to the Department of Education as well.
The Honourable Member from Halifax Clayton Park.
I wonder if the minister could provide a figure, though, for how much is going to strictly as a provision for the increase in contracts. Your teachers' union contract comes up this year, and there must be money set aside. There will be provisions in your other contracts for annual increases. And, I'd just like to know what of that $53 million is already called for those purposes. What percentage?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been informed, Madam Chair, that about $26 million will cover off the costs of salary increases, increase in transportations and fuel costs, basically increase in the operational costs, and that leaves
24 in the new initiatives, plus some other things.
24 in the new initiatives, plus the money
from Learning for Life,
plus
Learning for Life 1, the third year.
And plus the initiatives for Learning for Life 1, the third year.
The Honourable Member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you. I'd like to go on a little bit more with our numbers as well in this budget. Yesterday, or I guess it was 2 days ago when we spoke in estimates on Tuesday, you had indicated to me that the figure that was quoted in the release and with the budget excluded the money that comes from the mandatory education funding from the municipalities. And at the same time, the municipalities' contribution has increased this year because assessments are up across the province. So where's that money gone if that's not in the $53 million that you're announcing for public education or the $72 million that covers all education?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Go back to that question. My statement originated, if you remember, perhaps the day the budget was tabled or shortly after, we had made the statement we thought it was one of the largest increases in public education, and you had challenged that, and my staff, they went back and looked it up, and what I had said in the House was that I understood the reason for the difference in your figure and your statement and the one that I had made was that when you were talking about increases, the total amount of difference from one year to the next, the figures that you used included the residential tax contribution. The figure that we had used was exclusive of that, and if you compared just the straight government contribution, then this indeed was the largest increase. So we were talking about the same thing. And I understand why, when we went back and looked at the numbers, why there would be that disagreement, because staff clarified it for me. What are we talking about?
The mandatory education.
The mandatory education tax, yes. Okay, the money, the amounts that are tabled in the budget, Madam Chair, are the government contributions. Each municipality, I shouldn't say each municipality, because it isn't municipalities that are doing this. It's a property tax that flows through to the Department of Education. There is an assessment based on property tax. Now what happens is that money, the way it works, is collected by the municipalities and goes to the municipalities. In other words, Halifax collects X, Schenectady Central collects Y, and the amount of additional dollars that would flow to the independent school, the school boards, would be net of that amount. Does that make sense?
The honourable member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Through you, Madam Chair, that doesn't really make sense to me, because the municipalities don't want to collect it. They don't want to have it charged on theirs. They believe it should come from income tax and from other sources, and it goes directly to you. It goes directly to the Department of Education. In HRM, they definitely collect more in this mandatory education tax than is put towards the Halifax Regional School Board. It goes into a big pot, and the Department of Education allocates it based on need across the province. So there is a feeling that property taxpayers in HRM would be providing a subsidy. It's not directly allocated to our school board. So that's the part that doesn't make sense, if I could through you to the minister. The fact that you said it goes directly to the municipality and then to school boards. There's another part there, it goes to your department, and you determine the allocation of that. So my question originally was quite simple. If you disagree with me, I'll let you interrupt now. Yeah, go ahead.
The honourable Minister of Education.
It's a rather complex thing, but what I was trying to say is, and I'm going to look to these two gentlemen for advice in this thing, and I'm going to refer you to Table 5.3, is that the residential property taxes are paid to the municipality. The residential property taxes are paid to the municipality. A certain portion of those taxes are for education. Okay, we know how much that is for each municipality. So let's say that in Schenectady Central, they had a budget for education of $1 million. Okay, that was their total budget. That had been worked out, and that's the amount of money that the government was going to give them to spend on education. $1 million. They collected $140,000 in property taxes, because it's about 14%, and that's about what the residential property tax, that's about the percentage, 14?
14.5, yes.
14 and a half, it would be, okay, 14 and a half is around that. So they would keep that money, and the Department of Education would then write them checks in the amount of $860,000. It's just subtracted.
We could meet with her and go over.
Look,
Order. Could you direct the questions through the chair, please?
and I apologize for this, but look, I'd be happy to have staff meet with you and clarify, but it's just how the money goes. Now, if you want to turn to page 5.3 in the supplemental estimates, anyway, that details public education funding, and but anyway, I'd be happy to have staff meet with you and to explain that to you more fully.
The honourable member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that it does deserve a better airing, and I don't think my time allows it today to go into this, but the big thing I think that stands out is we seem to have a disagreement. My understanding was clearly, and actually on our HRM tax bills, our property tax bills, it is separated out. It's not part and parcel. The HRM has taken the step of showing that that portion of money is going to the provincial government for education, and that it's an amount outside of the councillor's control. And another question I'd like to leave with you on that before we get bogged down in the technicalities of how you do it is that the UNSM has asked repeatedly for you to freeze that amount and not to have this benefit, this bump every year because of increased assessments benefiting the Department of Education at the expense. I'm happy to see more money go to education, but at the expense of property owners who, again, we have to remind you that property tax doesn't take any account of your ability to pay. It means that people on fixed incomes and seniors and people with low incomes that may own homes are being taxed more heavily each year because their property is rising in value. Whereas income tax and some of the other methods that are at the control of the provincial government do reflect better people's ability to either consume products through HST or to pay because of their income tax. So could you address the UNSM's concern asking for a freeze, please?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really what the UNSM, and I guess effectively the province has frozen it. Now, it's not the freeze that the UNSM wants, but for 4 years in a row, the mandatory education tax rate has been 35 cents per 100. And so there has been a freeze. And what the UNSM is asking, it's not a freeze? No?
The rate statement.
The rate has been frozen for 4 years at 35 cents. Now, I know, like the honourable member does, that when the assessment goes up, obviously the amount of the education tax goes up. But I want to tell the honourable member there is not a jurisdiction in basically in Canada where property owners don't contribute. The amount that we contribute here in Nova Scotia as residential property tax owners, and to be quite frank, I don't have any children in public school, and I pay for it twice. I mean, I'm no different, and I'm happy to do that, by the way. As a matter of fact, I look along here, a number of people don't have children in public school that are probably doing the same thing. Mr. Morris, I think, has got about 4 in public school, so we have to exclude him. We're all subsidizing him. Yes. The mandatory education tax is a tax levied by the province and property owners, and is collected by municipalities. The average contribution in Canada. Actually, I do have a son graduating. Oh, do you really? Yeah. Most provinces support education with a property tax. Everybody would like to have their taxes capped. I know we've seen on the floor of this legislature on a number of cases where people would like to see assessments capped. But the fact is that the revenue from property assessments pays for municipal services and it pays for education. Clearly, if we could freeze the cost of education, which I know the honourable member doesn't want, because she's just suggested that I should have the adding machine to keep track of your suggestions, but the costs do keep going up is the point.
The honourable member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. And just for the record, officially, I have to counter what the minister said and say that, in fact, keeping the same percentage rate on a rising assessment base is not a freeze because you haven't capped or kept the same dollar amount. And you said in essence we have a freeze, but that's, as I say, that's a bogus argument that counselors often use themselves to take extra lifts in assessment. So I think it's important to mention that. I'd like to touch, I only have a short time left, and I would like to touch on post-secondary education for a minute. One of the things that is of concern to me at the moment was the discussion around Dalhousie's increase in tuition for the international students and the 3 professional schools. And in so doing, I mean, they've agreed with you in the MOU, that was all agreed to. I disagree that these increases should have been left outside of the 3.9% cap. But what I would like to ask you about the MOU is whether or not you're monitoring the compliance of the universities to your MOU, and whether or not you have looked into the assumption or the position that the Dalhousie Student Union has taken that says that Dalhousie has not made the 1% decrease in spending that they were supposed to. According to the MOU, there was originally discussion about a 1% efficiency saving, and that I think was translated into the request that all the universities would cut 1% of their spending. And my understanding is that they have not done that. They've reduced it by about 0.8% of, or something like that. It's less than 1% for Dalhousie, and that would not be in keeping with the MOU. So could I have your take on that, please?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
We too are interested to see that the conditions of the MOU are being followed to the letter. In that regard, we've written to each of the institutions covered by the MOU and asked them to demonstrate how they have met the conditions of the MOU. I can tell you in the case of Dalhousie is that we had a letter from the president who, in advance of our letter going out, by the way, saying that clearly he would be most happy on behalf of his university to show how they had met the conditions of the MOU, and if they had not, they would clearly be able, quite happy to make the necessary adjustment.
The Honourable Member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that you're pursuing it anyway, and we'll look into that. On the issue of the increasing fees for dentistry, medicine, and law, the increases have been quite steep this year for those 3 programs. I think 8% and 9%, something like that. And I think the premise is that these professional schools are going to have students who graduate and earn a lot of money. But I think that could be a fallacy. And again, I think we could be, harming ourselves by allowing the tuition rates to rise so rapidly in those areas. Can you explain why you exempted those 3 professional schools and the international students in the MOU?
Madam Chair, that this memorandum of understanding included 11 universities, and we were interested in protecting and getting a more stable, more stable funding to our universities to enable them to plan better, to get the university that I believe has about 40% of the student population in Nova Scotia to become a party to that agreement. They had specifically requested, and by the way, certainly as far as international students go, with the, I would think with the support of all the others, because all universities use international students not only to enhance and enrich their student body, but clearly there is some revenue associated with international students, because it doesn't matter where they come from. I think we still fund them. And so the international students, and quite frank, your question of why the university was not willing to cap the professional, I guess the professional schools and the international student increase at 3.9% is something you would be best directing your question to them. Clearly, I can tell you that that at the Board of Governors at Dalhousie, when the vote on the tuition fees was made, I think the vote actually was 15 to 14 or 11 to 10. It was a difference. I'm sorry, it was 11 to 10. Clearly, clearly the board, and I would look at that result as being a positive thing for the future.
The honourable member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On the international students' tuition increase, it was about 15% almost at Dalhousie, $810, I think, on their amounts. And I think it's worth noting that the one university in the province with the highest percentage of international students is Acadia, and they kept their increase at 3.9% for international students. So they did not take advantage or exploit the fact that they had so many international students and had an opportunity perhaps to charge them even more. And I think that again, I just refer you to the immigration strategy in which, we talk about wanting more university students here, more immigrants. The young people, as I said in one of my talks recently here in the House, I think in relation to the immigration, the changes to the Public Service Commission, which would introduce the immigration office, I made the point that often new families coming to Canada will do so not as they did before by sending the breadwinner first, but by sending a student first. And that student comes in and gets a feel for the country and decides if this is a welcoming place. So, we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot while we're trying to expand our immigration and really look at a very serious population and economic problem that we have. So I just urge you to look at that. And I'd like to go back to the ESL that we talked about the other day. When the Hogg report was introduced, and I was at that press conference and briefing, the commitment was clear that ESL was a significant cost for the Halifax Regional School Board, but not significant in the others, and it was therefore not in the funding formula, and it would be addressed separately by the Department of Education. And what you told me the other day is that the Department of Education has only budgeted $100,000 for that cost. Now, you indicated as well that the Office of Immigration is going to kick in $250,000 to Halifax Regional, so that gives us $350,000. But when I called the Halifax Regional School Board to find out what they're currently spending from supplementary funding dollars, again, a double tax on our property taxpayers here in Halifax, they're paying $750,000. So again, it's an extremely important service that's provided if we're going to have our schools function properly and these newcomers be properly welcomed and adapt. And although there's not a great deal in the strategy, it certainly says that language training is a priority for newcomers and a key to successful integration and ultimately retention. So if we're not, as a province, committed to paying for the ESL in our schools, we haven't gone very far in our commitment to immigration. And so I just want you to talk to the shortfall where $350,000 is identified through two departments, and the cost to HRSB is $750,000 this year. And I mention again, the school board superintendent had told me that with 11.5 teachers, it is still inadequate. So could you go back to that? I think it's a serious shortcoming.
Order. The time allotted for the honourable member has ended. If you want to answer, go ahead. The Honourable Minister of Education.
The issue of I think that may be just guessing. There was I think is NSGU. Yeah. I think it's the annual visit, perhaps from the annual meeting that's going on in the city. No, not the librarians, I don't think. Well, there may be some of them actually. Yes, could be. I don't know. Yes, the ESL shortcomings, and I just want to address this in a couple ways. First of all, we had talked about this the other day, and clearly, Mr. Hogg in his report, we see the ESL as being something that we had to take place of. I mean, quite frank, ESL was not in the program, public school program of studies, and therefore there was no obligation really on the part of the province to sing. However, the number, the immigration strategy, the number, for example, out in your constituency, you've got, I think somebody told me the number of language groups in one of the schools out there was 71 or 72, a fair bit. And we are investing more dollars in ESL. However, the Halifax School Board had committed about $700,000. Now, which is a good commitment. We have a commitment somewhere around 5 annualized this year. Anyway, the other thing I want to remind the member is that although they are spending that, they are also drawing a per pupil allowance for those students. And I suppose you could address it like special education that we've been on. I don't know how many people are in those classes, but you can take the number and multiply it by whatever the per pupil allowance is, and you'll find that it goes up significantly more. The other thing, and it's one of the things that we do in Nova Scotia, which is a strong point, but I think has to be recognized too, and I just put this on the table for information, not to really make any point of it, is that like many schools, particularly the high school and the junior high level, they do go out and recruit international students, and the international students pay a significant tuition fee, which goes to the board, and it goes, and a lot of that flows back into the schools, which, you know, it not only enriches the student body, but it is also a source of revenue for schools, and some schools it's a rather significant revenue. And if you look in the ESL classes, you may find that some of those exchange students, we'll call them exchange students, are enrolled in the ESL classes, yet none of the tuition fee that they pay is allocated to the ESL budget. I don't know whether it's significant or not. I'm just simply saying that I do know that that is the case, or not the case.
And we'll now go, oh, excuse me, Donovan.
With your permission, I'd be happy to table a copy of the minister's report to parents. So.
And we'll now go to the official opposition and the honourable member from Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Minister, for allowing me to continue with something related to the thread of questioning I was pursuing earlier. Talking about vocational schools and the loss of some of the physical facilities, and in some cases the actual instructional staff who are using those facilities. One of the things that I believe has been a factor in cost has actually been that of liability insurance. And I'm wondering if the Department of Education has in fact developed a department-wide policy about insurance costs. I know, for instance, that most municipalities are in fact using a self-insurance scheme, and I don't know whether the school boards are doing this, but not all are. Does the department have a policy or a way of helping the boards to obtain the insurance they need, which is appropriate for schools, including their vocational and their field trip components, both appropriate and cost-effective?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I'm advised, Madam Chair, that the school insurance process has not changed in the past number of years. They do it collectively. They've collected through the Nova Scotia School Boards Association. They get their insurance, and by the way, I'm told that that's been a good saving. If I remember correctly, the person who was the one that worked on that little project was a gentleman by the name of Mickey Woodford, whom some of you may remember from years ago. I think he was instrumental, was employed to set up that thing. And it still goes on. Now, individual students, and I would have to look to my colleagues for some help on this, particularly those who do have students going to school. They used to purchase, or given the option to purchase, individual insurance, which would cover accidents. You could buy it, you know, for 24 hours a day during the school year, or just for school activities, and I assume that that still goes on. I know that many of the some of the extracurricular activities, such as the contact sports, some of these things where there may be a chance of people getting heard a little bit more. In some cases, there was special riders on the insurance to cover those situations, or else they took out their own.
The honourable member from Halifax Atlantic.
Okay, so I guess it's not really something that the department involves itself in directly. I do have, this is a question though, because I think that a number of educational opportunities are limited for students, and it seems to be somewhat open to interpretation by staff and administrative staff at the particular board as to whether or not something is liable to fall under the available coverage or riders, and even if it's not required to have an additional rider. So this is one thing I think it is in some cases contributing to certain inequities in programming across the province. So I would just like to flag that. As you can see, I do have certain concerns around the basic issues of safety and so on. And I know that there has been difficulties, or there have been difficulties with school dismissal, emergency dismissal procedures. And there are times when it would seem that perhaps the boards should be drawing up guidelines for these to be vetted for the individual schools, because there have been occasions when they just plain fall down. Same thing. So is there any discussion about having board-wide dismissal procedures?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
To my knowledge, we've not had conversations with the boards about that, but my experience is that, my direct experience was that boards and schools all had their individual exit plans of that type. And I've not heard that there's been any difficulty with those. I mean, there's the odd case where somebody who was supposed to be available was not available. I mean, we run into glitches, but in general, they have their plans.
Member from Halifax Atlantic.
Yeah, no, I would like to flag that, because there have been at least a couple of cases where entire schools' worth of dismissal procedures have failed, and it would seem that perhaps it's too much to be requiring of each individual school to draw up a functioning plan. So this may be a place at which the board at least should be required to show some leadership, being well aware, obviously, the physical circumstances are different for every school, but perhaps the communications lines are going to be similar. The other question which I do have is about the relationship which the department has with the Department of Community Services around the ECDI, the Early Childhood Development Initiative. Do you have any kind of discussions going on at the moment with the department about the delivery of programming which will be done through the ECDI? One particular concern is that around the Department of Community Services' current apparent policy of eliminating allocated subsidized seats. And if we are going to be looking at early childhood learning as opposed to simply childcare or daycare, it is important that the centers which are providing that childcare or early childhood education, as you may choose to call it, do in fact have some stability of funding, stability of personnel, and stability of student population. It would seem to me that the provision of child care across the province is not only the responsibility of the Department of Community Services, but also that of the Department of Education. Can you tell me about the status of current cooperation between the two departments around ECDI?
Minister of Education.
You, Madam Chair, the honourable member may wish to direct questions to the Minister of Community Services when he's up in his estimates, but I can tell you that the Department of Education and the Department of Community Services are in regular communication on a number of issues. And of course, it goes across broader than that too with the kayak committee, which involves departments of community services, health, justice, and our own department. So yes, indeed, there is constant conversations among the departments and dialogue between the two departments. In terms of the early childhood initiative or the preschool pre-primary program, which is coming in, the person who has been employed to head up that initiative is seconded from the Department of Community Services. It's a person by the name of Nancy Taylor, and she is an early childhood educator by training. You indeed may know her.
Yes, okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. But the answer, I guess, is that there is not a formal structure at the moment for shared delivery of programming, and the responsibility for the, what shall I say, perhaps not the care, but the education of children before the age of 4 years old really does remain entirely, or at least administratively and outside the home, remains then entirely with the Department of Community Services.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
The Education Act requires that the Department of Education be responsible for the ages of children 5 through 20, I guess, and so anything prior to that. Now, we are moving in a different direction with these pre-primary pilots. We're moving down here, and we'll have responsibility for those. But no, the Madam Chair, through you to the honourable member, that is a matter for Community Services. They are their agent that is responsible for early childhood education. And be quite frank, most of the people, although there are some exceptions, who teach in the public schools, there would be a few early childhood educators, those who have gone one route and then switched into another. But in general, the training programs, the expectations, and the programming for early childhood education is different than that from public schools.
The honourable member from Halifax Atlantic.
Yes, I'm well aware that the training is in fact very different, and once again, it's something that I think it really does need to be looked to, because although the Education Act does in fact leave the responsibility for education between the ages of 5 and 20 to the department, as I know the department is well aware, the concept of lifelong learning involves learning from a young age, and when children do find themselves outside the care of their ordinary educators, then there is a responsibility to ensure that they are receiving the foundations of that lifelong learning, which the Education Department is laudably anxious to foster. So again, I would be very interested to know if there are mechanisms for future structural integration between the Department of Community Services, Child Care Services, and the Department of Education's early childhood education. And with that, Mr. Minister, I'd like to, or Madam Chair, I'd like to turn the time over to my colleague.
The honourable member from Pictou West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an issue here I want to bring to the Minister's attention, and this was to be an education budget, Madam Chair, and yet I'm surprised today to learn I have a letter here from the Pictou Regional Library, I'll get that out yet, that shows they're actually going to be receiving a decrease in their funding. And Mr. Minister, there was a letter written to you on May the 4th, outlined their concerns from their chairman, Mr. Poirier, and if you may remember, it outlines in the letter here at the UNSM conference in Truro last fall, you had indicated that you would be an increase of $750,000 in funding for the regional library boards. And on December 14th this year, there was a press release put out that indicated there'd be a $1.1 million new investment in our public libraries. But yet the Nova Scotia Provincial Library and the regional libraries around the province are telling us in this letter that they're actually going to receive less money. And the Regional Library Board says that the amount that they will receive in 2005, 2006 is $11,513,200, and that's an overall reduction in their promised funding. And meanwhile, the budget estimates are showing that only $10,763,000 is going to be there. That's a $750,000, $200 decrease. So naturally, they're very concerned about why they're getting a cutback in this, the year of the education budget. Mr. Minister, can you explain what's going on here?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very surprised to hear the honourable member talk about a cutback in library funding. The budget last year for public libraries is up $250,000 from what it was in 2004, 2005. In addition, Madam Chair, we distributed $1.1 million. We're able to an additional investment which was given in the spring of this year, which will be revenue that the boards, no way they would have been able to spend that in the last budget year, excuse me, so that money was available to them this year, and that was quite clear when we gave them the money, and everybody understood that. There was, a few years ago, a funding formula, funding formula review. I guess it was under, when you were there, I think, was it? Or, there was a funding formula review, libraries which made some recommendations that would have seen significant reductions in some parts of the province. The library things are census-based. The old formula is still in place, and if there would be a slight drop in that revenue, it would have been based on a formula to which all the library boards had agreed to. But I think if you take a look at the money that board received in the investment just prior to the beginning of this budget year, they have more money to spend this year, certainly, than they had to spend last year. And I will also tell the honourable member, although I had to make an adjustment in my schedule because of the House hours on Monday, I am being visited by the chair of our local library board and also the head of the public library, and I expect that if you got a letter, I'm going to get one too.
The honourable member from Pictou West.
Well, maybe, Mr. Minister, I'll ask you, have you actually received this letter from the Pictou Antigonish Regional Library, dated May the 4th and signed by Conrad Poirier, the chair of the Pictou Antigonish Regional Library? Well, I guess it's in the mail, as they say, but anyway, in the letter it certainly outlines again, as I mentioned, your promise at the UNSM for $750,000 more, the press release that your department put out on the 14th of December of a new investment of $1.1 million, and they're saying very clearly that they're disappointed they're getting a cutback in their funding here of more than $750,000. And libraries are important to our provincial persona. They provide good reading material for many people, provide good quality information to residents throughout this province. And obviously, from this letter, there's a reduction, and they feel, in the budget, and they're not very happy with it. So again, I'm going to ask Mr. Minister, why is there a reduction in the budget for provincial libraries this year in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I have not seen the letter, and I'm really surprised that that chair of a library board would write a letter when we gave an additional $1.1 million, and they were told explicitly why the money flowed when it did. I guess I'd have to see the letter and perhaps get an explanation from, but clearly the library boards got more money this year than the amount of money that they had available to them this year. We had promised $750. It is up above that by, they got $500,000, $600,000 more than I had said at the UNSM.
The honourable member from Pictou West.
Well, again, I'll just ask, after you get the letter, Mr. Minister, to have a look at it, and this is a very serious concern for the Pictou-Antigonish Regional Library, as it will be for other regional library boards, and I'd ask that you give it your utmost attention and see if maybe the information is correct, and to see if this can be adjusted to look after the regional library boards, particularly the Pictou-Antigonish Regional Library Board.
The honourable member from Timberlea Prospect.
We could be having a Muir moment here as opposed to a Baker break. No, I'll give him a moment if you want to look at the letter, Mr. Minister.
The honourable Minister of Education.
Madam Chair, and it clearly understands, according to Mr. Poirier, that while the remaining $750,000 was to be set aside and used as part of the operating funds for 2005-2006, so we promised $750, and clearly this letter acknowledges it. And in addition, we put another 250 in, so he does. I'll have to read the letter in detail, but clearly acknowledges that 750 did flow. So.
Honourable member from Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. It's with pleasure that I recognize the members of my caucus as they bring individual concerns in this important department to your attention, and it's. As a critic, of course, you always make sure that you make ideal time available for the moments that they have to bring up issues. And I want to compliment the members today who, very positively addressed issues of some concern to them and, of course, to the communities that I represent. And again, I say it's a privilege to bring issues forward. I want to be clear on the fact that I'm going to bring some negative media results to the minister's attention. And I have a few headlines that I think deserve some comment, and it's quite ironic. It's not ironic, it might be coincidental that this headline was in the February 2nd edition of the Herald. School libraries lack funds, Ham told. And we've heard today how important school libraries are and the importance they are in the community, and we are, of course, well aware of the constant pressure and the decisions of what's going to be taken care of in the education system. But there's no more negative public relations that this minister's been involved with than this picture. And I know we're not allowed props, so I'm just going to table it. But I'm going to refer to it a couple of times. Here is the Minister of Education signing the Memorandum of Understanding, head down, surrounded by the university presidents. And in front of him is an outstanding young woman named Danielle Sampson from the Canadian Federation of Students, who has basically crashed the party. I remember that day well, and since then I've had the opportunity to speak and to listen to, more importantly, listen to Danielle Sampson. And it's an example of how, if we're going to, as legislators, make decisions that affect the young people of whatever age, but in this case, university students, post-secondary students, and we're not going to listen to them, we're going to end up with nasty confrontations such as that was. And I know that there were some university presidents there who were, you look at their looks in the background, they're somewhat amused by the fact that this young woman showed the initiative to take a petition and say that she disagrees for various reasons when it comes to this Memorandum of Understanding. This memorandum of understanding was obviously some hard bargaining. There was obviously lots of consultation. But the key thing is the students weren't consulted. The students affected, the student leaders were not part of the loop. And they feel that was, at the least, a slight to them as duly educated, duly elected educational leaders. They were not part of any kind of discussion in advance of this memorandum of understanding. So I would like to ask the minister if he's learned any lessons, or has his department learned any lessons from this experience when the memorandum of understanding comes forward. You know, I see Colin Dodds signing the document. I see the minister, his head down, signing the document. And I see this young woman standing in front of them, making her point on behalf of students, not just on behalf of the students of the Naskead College of Art and Design University down the street. And I know the minister knows my daughter attends that university. Not just on behalf of that particular institution, but behalf of the Canadian Federation of Students, of which Danielle Sampson is a vice president. Have we learned any lessons because of not consulting and having these young men and women involved in the process? And do you give this some assurances that this will not happen again, the consulting of educational leaders?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the honourable member for his observation. I am well aware that I know that NASCAD is particularly dear to his heart, and that indeed he does have a daughter who attends that very fine institution. Just a couple of comments in this before I give a direct answer to his questions. The memorandum of understanding was something that we thought was in the best interests of all, primarily in the interests of students, and that was the focus when we started this. And clearly it was trying to keep the fees down for students, and we were committed to that. And as part of that process, we were prepared, like we did in the Department of Health, to commit to a 3-year funding formula for universities in exchange for some things. First of all was a cap on undergraduate student tuition of 3.9%. And as I've said, that over the 3-year period of the agreement, if you were to compare increases that had been common in the past 5 years to the increases that will be put in place over the next 3 years, an individual student would save somewhere around $2,600. So, you know, the implementation of the cap, we believe, was a good thing. And, you know, I regret that we weren't able to include all of the students in that cap. However, the great majority of undergraduate students and the ones that would not be included would, of course, be the international students. So that was a good agreement, and that really was the first agreement that I know of in Canada between a Department of Education or a government and its university system. You know, we say we had done it in health. We were the first in health, and there's considerable interest in what we've done here in Nova Scotia in other parts of the country. They're looking at it with a good thing, and as I've told our public school partners, that I would hope that we would be able to extend this type of long-term funding to them as well, because when you know annually, or you know 2 years down the road how much money you're going to have to spend, then clearly there are efficiencies that can be built in, and administrative and other types of arrangements that can be made over a period of time. They can't, maybe not just a one-shot deal doesn't work, that these efficiencies can be achieved. And indeed, the universities opted for that. And as in response to a question from the member from Halifax Clayton Park, we are currently in discussion with universities, in correspondence, I guess perhaps better than discussion, to ensure that the terms and conditions of the Memorandum of Understanding have indeed been followed. You know, certainly we followed it on our side, and I am confident on the other side they followed it as well. I should also say that this issue, the issue raised by the member from Timberley Prospect, was drawn to the attention of the Human Resources Committee back early in April, I think early in April or sometime in March. And the young woman to whom he referred did present at that committee. At that time, the deputy who was there on behalf of the department and me did commit that certainly in the future, in the negotiation of any such agreement, university students would be more fully involved. Now, I'm not, you know, you take the position where they weren't involved, and I mean, clearly we knew their issues. Their issues had been articulated to us many times before, and you know, the big issue is keep the cost down. Keep the cost down, and that's what we attempted to do. You should also be aware, as the honourable member, and I know he is, that there are two student groups in Nova Scotia. There was the group represented by Ms. Simpson, and then there was another student group, and they don't necessarily see eye to eye on every issue. And therefore, it is not just as simple as it seems. You know, if you were going to involve people, then you would pick from student organizations, and when you have two organizations that don't necessarily see eye to eye, this was a first trip through, and indeed, more consultation probably, you know, would have been better. But I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm simply saying that there were circumstances. The other thing that we reasoned is that university presidents were in constant contact with their boards, and of course, there are many student representatives on the board of every university in the province, so they would be involved in that way. We have now made the commitment, and any subsequent agreements students will be involved much more heavily, and it's likely that we are going to try to put a similar arrangement, begin negotiation for a similar arrangement with community college in this fiscal year, and I will assure them that students will be heavily involved in that process.
Member from Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, and we all know about student politics. Student politics from our own years on campus were somewhat a little bit more radical than they are now as they prepare. I see many of these university presidents who are dealing with many of these university student leaders, and you know, I'm sometimes wondering who's more small c conservative, the university president or some of the elected student leaders, and that's the little bit of edge that maybe they don't have anymore as they prepare themselves to go to law school. Danielle Sampson, if that's what they're aiming for, Danielle Sampson did say at Human Resources these things: a needs-based grant is a grant, and she's answering a question from me at this stage. A needs-based grant is a grant that's based on the student's financial need. So it's a non-repayable grant, it's upfront, and that's to equalize the opportunities for low-income students and those from higher and middle-income students. There are some provinces, Danielle goes on to answer my question. Actually, Nova Scotia is one of the only provinces that has eliminated its needs-based grants program, one that we had. Now, I've heard your deputy respond to these comments, and I would like if you could take a few moments at this time and respond to Danielle Sampson's comments in terms of the fact, do you see the need in this province for a needs-based grants as the one that was described in her comments from Danielle Sampson?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Responded with it in this way, Mr. Chair. We're currently about to embark on negotiations with the Canada Millennium Foundation, and if we are successful, there will be some elements those scholarships are needs-based, some element of a grant in that. However, the student loan program is indeed needs-based, and of course we've introduced a loan remission what do we call that, loan? Debt reduction program, which obviously, if a student meets the criteria, makes all the payments, continues to work in Nova Scotia, will see about 50% of their Nova Scotia portion of their student loan forgiven. So I guess maybe it's not needs-based. Well, you say it's needs-based because presumably people who have student loans get it because they need it. Therefore, there is the opportunity to have a significant portion of the Nova Scotia student loan removed.
Member from Timberley Prospect.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. I am now actually going to talk about student loans. And your deputy is on the record as he spoke in response to the committee in which I attended, and he was, of course, accompanied by Kevin Chapman, which was a good use of committee time that day, that afternoon, when we were looking at student loans. And this took place on Tuesday, February 22nd, incidentally. In his comments, Mr. Cochrane says, it's a convoluted system. And he's talking about student loans. It's a convoluted system. I, for one, have been quite critical of the relationship between the province of Nova Scotia and the provinces in the federal government. We would have students in this province, depending on where they went, they may be dealing with 3 different service providers concerning their student loan. A convoluted system. Mr. Cochrane goes on to say later, it goes through a very convoluted process. My opinion does not surprise them when he's talking about the federal government, but I think we have to focus on the client. I've never competed with the national anthem before, but we're going to continue. The client is the university student or post-secondary student going to the community college, university, or private career college. And it's a bit of a quagmire to work their way through it. Now, first of all, I want to qualify my comments by saying that the student loans people have been very good. They get back to us when students bring concerns to our attention, when they happen to drop into your office, or I've seen them in various other circumstances when they're working in a restaurant or a local establishment, and they come up with problems about student loans, and I say to them, well, give me the details, put it on paper, let me tell you what I can do for you, and then we have a follow-up meeting with these students. Students, when it comes to student loans, become very quickly frustrated with the process. And I know that in many occasions, students in the post-secondary would probably find it quite difficult to believe. That's being a bit sarcastic, I take that back. They might find it a bit ironic that the Deputy Minister of Education is agreeing with him. It's a quagmire and it's convoluted, right? Now, they're not pointing fingers necessarily at Kevin Chapman and the people in that department, but they are pointing fingers at the fact that the student loan process is at times extremely frustrating. It's extremely frustrating for them as young men and women. And I would like you to confirm that, if you could, Mr. Minister, and hopefully you will, that you would agree with your deputy that it is a convoluted system and a quagmire. Because for once, I completely agree with Mr. Cochrane.
Thank you for the question, member, and direct that question to the Minister of Education.
The fact that you and the deputy, the honourable member and the deputy, Mr. Chair, are agreeing makes me wonder whether I should even venture into this into this realm. I think what you had the direct interface with the deputy in that committee meeting on February the 22nd, which, by the way, is George Washington's birthday. A little history fact today. Same day? Well, he also mentioned February the 2nd, which had been my birthday, so I thought I was, two dates in a... Yeah, so,
I'll send you a card on the appropriate date, Minister. Thank you.
Anyway, what he was saying is that, the position of our department really is that we think the student loan programs ought to be integrated. We recognize that some of the criteria and the conditions of the Canada Student Loan Program differ from the criteria and the conditions, how the Nova Scotia Student Loan Program operates. The application forms, you have to apply separately for each loan, which is, and the application forms aren't exactly identical. We understand that there is some room for streamlining this process, indeed making it more user-friendly. And, a number of other provinces have opted for integration of the student loans to improve students' services to students, and we are pursuing that option now for that reason.
Thank you, Minister. The member from Timberley Prospect.
Thank you. I know we all recognize the importance of student loans because it's of real consequence. And, I hear certain members of the third party wax eloquent at times about going to university. That particular day, I must say, at that particular meeting, I found it a bit ironic that a senator's son was talking about student loans. But let me tell you, this penitentiary guard's son had a student loan. And if I hadn't got that student loan, with a little bit of help, and I could say it now under the table for other reasons, I would never have been able to go to university. Never have able to go there because of the agreement that was made that I wouldn't have to pay my residence fee, but instead I would have to work every morning in the kitchen detail at Mount Allison University. That was a hand up and a hand out, and my father and I both took it graciously. But when it comes to student loans, students have to have faith in the fact that the right people are getting the loans for the right reasons, and that universities or community colleges are not just based on admittance because of the fact that your daddy or your mother has a checkbook that can get you there. Because let me tell you, I have dealt with many young men and women in the school system who are exceedingly qualified and very, very rich in thought, but maybe dad or mom doesn't have the rich in the pocketbook to get them there. And we can under no circumstances allow our post-secondary institutions to end up becoming elitist, preferring only the people who can send their children there to afford them. Thank you, however, for those comments. I'd like to turn to the topic of another negative headline, in my opinion, and it comes from the Daily News. Kathy Nichol and Shauna McKinley, if I have spelt or I've pronounced Shauna's name correctly or not. School fees are cash cow. And so it's with great interest that we always look at these lists. It's the Ames list or the school fees list. I want to share this with you. Brookside Junior High School, population 425 students, 2 years ago generated $462,757. And that revenue from that small little junior high school on the Prospect Road was revenue that came into the principal's hands, and it came into the principal's hands through a number of sources. Of course, that includes the dollars that were brought forward through fundraising for school trips, fundraising for extra activities, fundraising for, in some cases, the necessities that were identified by the School Advisory Council. I don't live on the Prospect Road, but I want to use comparatively this, that Richcliffe Middle School in Timberley raised approximately $270,000. Tantallon Junior High received in the way of revenues from various sources, but the community is where they're getting it from. The moms and dads' pockets, the grandparents' pockets, let's call it $300,000 in fees or in funds that were raised. Now, Mr. Minister, this has become a huge problem. This has become a huge problem. School fees and fundraising all get clumped together. And that's the first thing that we must dissociate here. You know, school fees in terms of when the kids register at the first of the year, what specifically are they paying for in the package? You know, if your son or daughter is in high school, some schools in some boards can have a lab fee, you can have a yearbook fee, you can have an athletic participation fee. You pay for your locker. You might have some other things involved there if you're in a computer course and you have to make sure there's a certain amount of money that's available because of potential damage to the computer. That's the topic of school fees. And I would like to talk about that first. School fees. We've got to get a handle on this thing. Because in certain boards, school fees are out of sight. You know, you have a package where you say if you have 2 children in a high school and you're coming home with a bill of $300 that you have to put across, and there are such places. There are such schools. Most of them, unfortunately, are located in the HRM. But do you really, or is anyone in your department really seriously looking at this issue of the problem of school fees? And secondly, I'll come to fundraising in a moment.
Thank you for the question. I'll direct the question to the Minister of Education. Minister.
The numbers, the amounts of money raised and some of the bank accounts of schools in the province, particularly in HRM, it seemed to me, I can remember perhaps it was in that list where there was a school had something like $500,000 in the bank. I would expect, you talked 462, 270, and 300. Those are big numbers. The school 425, that you know, that really is $1,000 per student, a little bit more than that. I wonder if the cafeteria revenues are included in that, and I believe one of the schools that the honourable member referred to is a P3 school as well, and I you know, in terms of the revenue, how they account for it. But I guess our concern really as the Department of Education is whether children are asked to pay fees for access to public school programs that we fund. And we are really concerned if students are paying for what is mandatory. You know, we've conducted a survey of all Nova Scotia school principals to try collect information on curriculum-based school fees, and I think we have most of the information in now, but because of this time of year, we haven't had really the opportunity to fully analyze what we have, but we will have that, and I don't see any reason, at least, why we wouldn't make that information available to everybody. You know, we may have to knock something off it, but it's not something we intend to keep secret.
Thank you, Minister. The member from Timberley Prospect.
I've had the occasion on a number of very pleasant meetings with Bev Mellon, and Ms. Mellon is the past president of the Nova Scotia Home and School Association. She's brought this concern to my attention, and at one time she was a constituent of mine before boundary redistribution took place. And there are examples that Bev brought to my attention personally that in certain situations fundraising involves actual things that are you consider a necessity in a school. There have been fundraising drives in certain schools around this province for school desks, so that if a principal, along with his school advisory staff, school advisory council, made the decision with input from the school staff that, you know, we need some new school desks. So you make the contact with whatever company it is, Venres or whoever the current people are in school furniture, and you actually end up fundraising for school desks. Now, you can't get any more basic than that, and that's a huge concern. I mean, when we have kids arrive at our door at home who are selling chocolate bars, heaven forbid, but they still do that, okay? Selling chocolate bars or tickets or various things for a trip to Quebec City as a member of the French immersion class. That's good. These young men and women are showing some initiative. They're getting out there doing some fundraising. They're making sure that they're contributing to the cause. You know, I can say just last Saturday evening, we had a very successful Brookside fundraising auction, of which I had the privilege of being the auctioneer. Now, you can imagine if it's hard to listen to me for an hour in this house, how would you like to listen to me for 2 hours? That would be tough. We made lots of money, in excess of $5,000 and let me tell you, the communities are at the stage, they've got it right to here. You know, you see another ticket or another chocolate bar, and I won't tell you where they usually are positioned, but it's usually Friday afternoon, and I'm walking into my favorite NSLC, and there they are. You run the gauntlet. You got the soccer kids, and they're all school kids, of course, right? And they know where to put them, and the teachers know where to put them because of the fact they're selling tickets. They're selling chocolate bars. I'm concerned about the fact that we have a problem when it comes to selling things for necessities, and I look forward to the report that you're coming forward with. Mr. Minister, I receive many press releases in the run of a year from your department, and I must compliment them. Most times I'm well aware of events, although on occasion I've been late for some of them. And I must say to you and to your staff that I do appreciate the heads up. I did receive, however, a very amusing press release from Francis McKenzie, the Liberal leader, for immediate release April 4th, 2005. McKenzie says province-wide consistency is needed in public education. Now the new, or is he? I think he's beyond stale, but he's not the new leader anymore. He says, or it says in the opening paragraph, Nova Scotia Liberal leader Francis McKenzie today announced that he wants Liberals and all Nova Scotians to consider standardized testing and standardized curriculum in public schools throughout the province. I'm not going to read the whole release to you because it's just nonsense. Are you telling me, Mr. Minister, that we do not have a standardized curriculum across this province? I would be shocked and I would be appalled if that was the case. But that's what the Liberal leader is challenging you and your department about. Do we have inconsistencies in curriculum across this province?
The Minister of Education.
I can say to that, and I understand why the honourable member somewhat smiled at that release, considering some of the questions have been asked about standardized testing the past year. But indeed, there is a program of studies for schools in Nova Scotia, a set of standard curricula guide for teachers. There are some local options, so I guess there would be some in those local options courses, teachers. The other thing is that within some courses, teachers are given the freedom to make selection from the approved list of materials. So the text read in one classroom in an English class might not be the one that's read in another one. But clearly, no, the curriculum, the aims, objectives are standard across the province.
Thank you, Minister. The member from Timberley Prospect.
What a relief. What a relief, because that was my impression from the get-go, that we have standardized testing, and it's something that we need to make sure that we monitor the success of children. I would hope that there'd be at times more input from teachers in the classroom level, but standardized curriculum, I mean, that is a given. That is what we have all been working for forever. That's one of the most important requirements that, of course, we have as teachers based upon the guidebooks, based upon the curriculum people who are giving this advice. I want to tell you, I had a laugh that day. That was not something that I wanted to mock, but something I had to bring to your attention, and I'm relieved with it. I want to talk, though, about a topic that's of some concern to me, and that is, of course, that special needs kids continue to fall through the cracks. And Marilla Stevenson, and I've referred to Marilla earlier in my comments the other day, I quite candidly say I don't always agree with her, but she stirs it up. And I know that we can say that there's some difficulties involved when journalists take on school issues because maybe they don't understand the whole thing. But in an article she wrote recently, education system is failing special needs kids. I take that to task, and teachers are doing their best. They are in a situation where they have immense demands put upon them. The concern that I'm going to address, if I may, is the fact that, and I hear from school principals about it, in August, and I hear from parents about it in September, that their child, who is in various degrees identified as a special needs child, who's in a regular classroom, and that is the way that it must go. That is a wonderful decision that I fully support. The concern that I have is that when it comes to the teacher's aide, the student's personal